when I got the phone call from UG Solutions on the 13th of May. I had only been out of the army for about 70 days. I was not planning on being a contractor. I was not planning on doing any type of work in the industry. I was very happy being a husband and a father, being present for my family, and I had a part-time job at Lowe's hardware store, which is a large hardware store chain in the United States, where I was working in lawn and garden, and I was happy. Um, they UG Solutions called me on the 13th of May, and they informed me that they were specifically looking to recruit and hire recently retired or out of service soldiers that had an operations background, specifically in special operations. So that's that's why they contacted me. Um, when they first contacted me, I was not interested because I had never heard of UG Solutions. I was not aware of what the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation was. So I told them, give me a day to kind of do some of my own research. And I was aware of what was happening in Gaza with the war and the conflict. And I was keeping up kind of abreast of things that were happening operationally. And to be honest, I didn't really understand as well as I understand now the humanitarian assistance mechanism in terms of what the UN provided at scale and what the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation was promising to provide. So, from my perspective, I felt, well, if there is no aid going into Gaza and there is an entire enclave of Palestinians that are not receiving food or any type of means to survive, that if this is going to be the method that's going to replace the UN, then I feel that I have skills, expertise, knowledge that could go towards helping that effort. So um, I specifically agreed or took the job because I really did believe in the purpose and in helping and in doing something that I felt was important for humanity and for a people that from all for all intents and purposes, from what I could understand.
Sorry, Anthony, I think you broke up.
Oh, did you hear the last part of it? So I was saying, to join the mission for its purpose and for what I had believed it was intending to achieve. I felt like I could contribute towards helping in that operation. So I joined the contract because I was motivated uh, to help and do good for humanity and to help the Palestinians.
Anthony, I also heard on an interview you talk about the reason why you wanted to help out from a humanitarian perspective was your upbringing, your Christian values. Do you want to espouse a bit more on that in terms of the morality and ethics that made you go towards helping the people of Gaza?
Well, I spent my entire adult life doing what I felt was something that was important and that was grounded in values. And I've shared this before, but I joined the army when I was 17. I wasn't even old enough to vote in the United States. So I joined the army before I was even old enough to vote in our elections, vote for my commander in chief. I spent my entire military career having not voted in not one single election in the United States because I felt that it was my duty and my obligation to remain apolitical. In going in to support this operation, I had no motivations politically, no vote motivations in terms of religion. My motivations were because I do believe that the Palestinians are being oppressed. They're being oppressed in large scale, and that the world not wasn't really paying attention, and I felt that in going that I could do some good. So less so about my Christian values, although my upbringing in a is important, but more so because uh, for humanitarian reasons, for humanitarian purposes, that American values, that if we're going to be involved in this, we don't stand for people starving to death. We don't stand for women and children being killed. We don't stand for the world turning an eye to an entire population being oppressed. And it's not it was something that I just couldn't live with without trying to do good.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And so let's talk about when you arrived. So you arrived in Gaza on the 17th of May, 2025. What was the first impressions you had in terms of what you saw in terms of how apocalyptic the landscape was, how much of a war zone it was, comparing to your other places that you witnessed, such as Iraq, Afghanistan, and Syria?
So to be just to, for clarity, I flew out of the United States on the night of the 17th, flew through the 18th, landed in Tel Aviv at through at Ben Gurion Airport on the 19th of May. There was some initial planning that went into things, which I was wholly unimpressed by the effort that the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation had put into planning this mission. And the first day I went into Gaza was the 24th of May. That day will stick in my mind for the rest of my life. I have seen war, and I have seen combat in four wars that the United States has been a part of. Operation Enduring Freedom Philippines in southern Mindanao, fighting the Moro Islamic Liberation Front. Operation Inherent Resolve in Syria and Iraq, fighting ISIS. Operation Enduring Freedom, Afghanistan, fighting in Afghanistan and fighting the Taliban and later ISIS Khorasan. And fighting in Iraq in Operation Iraqi Freedom 4, 5, 6, and 8. Um, I have never seen the level of absolute annihilation and destruction than I witnessed when I entered Gaza. I entered Gaza on the 24th of May in the morning through the Karim Shalom crossing, Karim Shalom Gate, which is to the south on the Israeli Gaza border. And when I drove in through the Karim Shalom station, it's a large kind of a border crossing port, warehouses and such, an industrial kind of area. And when we drove through Karim Shalom and we cleared the industrial area, and I was able to see the entirety, this panoramic view of Gaza, I was speechless. I was sick to my stomach. I had no words to describe the amount of destruction and annihilation. There's no other word to describe it that I witnessed, and um, I immediately knew that there was a lot worse going on in Gaza that the world was led to believe, and it really affected me. It's the worst I've ever seen in 12 deployments, 25 years in the army, and 4 wars. It's the worst I've seen.
That's very difficult to hear. Just from the audience's perspective, because there's a few different entities involved in the GHF. So if you're able to explain the structure and roles of the GHF, Safe Reach Solutions, and UG Solutions in the distribution of the aid and the various aspects of what was happening in terms of, security, safety, and all those things.
That's a great question, and I think that that's something that more people need to understand and realize, that the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation advertises as being a nonprofit humanitarian organization, and it's cloak and dagger. It's deceitful, because the mechanism within the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation that is actually the mechanism that is doing all of the work in terms of the logistics, the security, the humanitarian assistance, in Israel into Gaza is a company called Safe Reach Solutions. And that company is not a nonprofit. It is absolutely a for-profit company. They are contracted by the Israeli government. The Israeli government through Kogat, the Center for Government and Activities in the Territories. It's a Ministry of Defense organization within the Israeli government. Safe Reach Solutions is contracted by the Israeli government through Kogat, through the IDF, as the provider to the client being the IDF. Safe Reach Solutions has no experience, background, staff, or backbone in conducting humanitarian assistance, much less the delivery of humanitarian aid. The guy in charge of Safe Reach Solutions is a man named Phil Riley, who his career, he was a Special Activities Division branch chief in the CIA, America's Central Intelligence Agency. No background in humanitarian aid. And then underneath Safe Reach Solutions is UG Solutions. UG Solutions was the subcontract under Safe Reach Solutions for armed security of the aid. So the best way to describe this is that the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation would be the mortgage company, if you will, the lender, the bank. They don't really touch the money. They just kind of hold the deed. Safe Reach Solutions would be the contractor building the house. UG Solutions would be a subcontractor, doing the plumbing or the electricity. But in this case, they're providing the armed security. So it's really this cloak and dagger organization, nesting doll of deceit in terms of what's really going on in terms of profit, cost cutting, and what I believe is a deliberate and designed effort to annihilate the Palestinian population.
So, okay, so now let's talk about the distribution aspect of it. Walk us through a typical day at a secure distribution site. Like, what happens in the morning? What happens? Like, what was the processes that was meant to be involved in terms of the distribution?
Another great question. I think it's important to understand before I go into the mechanics of the distribution sites themselves that under the previous mechanism, which was under the United Nations and UNRWA, there were 400 distribution sites in Gaza throughout the entire enclave, north, south, central, west, east, 400. Now, under the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation mechanism, there are only 4. Just think about that. 4. And none of them, not a single distribution site, is north of the Nesarim corridor in Gaza City or Jabalia, where the isolated population, the most vulnerable population, the starving population, has no access to these distribution sites, therefore, no access to food. That is intentional. That's not an accident. So, to walk you through a secure distribution site, I'll walk you through kind of a day of how that would go. Let's just say it's a Wednesday. Well, on Tuesday, the IDF at 11 o'clock would have given us our orders. Here's your orders. Here's the site you're going to deliver to. Here's the time you're going to deliver. Here's how many trucks you're going to deliver. Here's how long you're going to distribute. They controlled every aspect of what the aid mechanism was. And that was orders given to us for the next day. So that's Tuesday. So then on Wednesday, we're executing the previous day's assignment, the previous day's orders. And as an example, let's say that distribution would have been at secure distribution site number 1, which was in the southern portion of Rafah, near the Egyptian Gaza border, near the Mediterranean coast border, down in that far, far, far southern corner. Mind you, there are no Palestinians that live there. Everything south of the Marag corridor which is everything south of southern Mawasi, all of Rafah, and the southern part of Khan Yunis, south of that, there are no Palestinians that live there. That area is entirely ravaged, razed to the ground, annihilated. Nothing remains. So the distribution sites were established in areas where there are no Palestinians living. So it forces them to travel to these sites, great distances. So if on secure distribution site on Wednesday, we were distributing at 5 a.m., we would begin delivery of trucks around 9 p.m. the night prior, because loading the trucks, unloading the trucks, reloading the trucks, unloading the trucks onto the site, it's a laborious process. It takes a lot of logistics. It would take us quite a long time. So we'd when we would through the night, when we would deliver the aid and bring the aid to the site, we didn't put it in a way to distribute it in a measure of accountability, or in a way to track who is getting aid, or validating or verifying who is coming to the sites. None of that. We put it in a giant pile, piled it up in a big line of boxes, stacks of boxes. As an example of that, nine trucks delivered to the site would be 25,000 boxes piled at 5 a.m., which was the advertised distribution time. So before 5 a.m., the Palestinians that have to walk to get to these sites because they cannot drive, and they are restricted to traveling down the safe corridors, which, if you're in central Gaza, to get to southern Gaza, you have to walk all the way west to the coast. You have to walk down the coastal corridor, and then you wait at the intersection of the Morag corridor and the coastal corridor, where there's a large traffic circle. This traffic circle is where a lot of deaths, shootings, um, Palestinians have been killed. That's where you hear a lot about of those that are killed. It's at that location. And they'll be held there. Palestinians will be held there to the magnitude of thousands, at sometimes 8 to 9,000. On the very first day we did distribution on the 27th of May, 35,000 Palestinians held in this massive queuing line. So at 5 a.m., the IDF would release the crowd, not in any type of organized fashion, not in any type of order. They would release the crowd at one time, and you would have a massive rush of 9,000 people rushing in one group, one crowd, to the site down a very narrow military corridor. And how did the IDF control the crowd in terms of keeping them moving a certain direction, or keeping them from moving off a certain road? They shot at them. They used machine guns, mortar rounds, to fire at the crowds, shot at their feet, shot over their heads, shot towards the coast, as they will often say. The coast, by the way, was lined with hundreds of thousands of Gazans who were either living in the Mawasi camp or were there waiting to move to get food. So 9,000 Palestinians on foot, women, children, the elderly, men and women, unarmed, non-hostile, most of them not wearing shoes, most of them in a state of hunger, severe hunger or starvation. And on their way to the sites, they would get shot at. And once they got to the site, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation run site, it was a survival of the fittest, free for all. The fastest and the strongest get the food, and the vulnerable do not. So who didn't get food? Women, children, the elderly, the disabled. 25,000 boxes between 8 to 9,000 people gone in 8 minutes. The fastest I clocked a distribution of the aid being gone, 6 minutes and 13 seconds. On average, 8 minutes. 25,000 boxes gone. And who gets there at the end? Women and children, and there's no food. Once the IDF communicated to the to the site, to the UGS contractors on site. The UG that said the site's closed, get the Palestinians off the site. The standard practice, again, because there were no rules of engagement given, there were no standard operating procedures given, there were no rule escalation of force measures communicated. So what the UG Solutions contractors would do, they would begin online pushing forward, and they would begin with pepper spray, spraying the crowd with pepper spray. Get out of here, time to leave, go, yelling at them. No interpreters, no way to communicate other than just yelling or spraying them with pepper spray. And then as the crowd began moving towards the exit, which was not marked, by the way, there was no way for the Palestinians to discern which was the entrance and which was the exit. So you had this panic. You had people being sprayed with tear gas, with pepper spray, who were then trying to get off the site and not knowing which way to go. So then the contractors would begin throwing stun grenades into the crowd. And these stun grenades, there were two different types. One would explode with a flash and a bang and emit these rubber pellets. One that was thrown would have a flash and a bang and then emit tear gas. So these would be thrown at the crowd. And then once the crowd was pushed off the site, the UG Solutions contractors would then move up to the berm in Overwatch, and they would fire warning shots. Mind you, a warning shot is lethal ammunition, bullets. There's no such thing as a with high powered rifles and machine guns as a fake bullet. Bullets are bullets. Warning shot or not, lethal ammunition being fired at the crowd. And what I would like to add is that GHF and UG Solutions themselves, in their own release statements, in their own official statements, have said that, well, we don't fire at the crowd. We fire at their feet, we fire overhead, and sometimes we fire towards the coast. Again, if you're firing your weapon into the air towards the coast, you're killing Palestinians. If you're shooting at their feet with high powered rifle ammunition, you're going to hit somebody. If you're firing over their head, and the bullets that are flying over the head of one group that are going into the crowd on the other side of a berm, you're hitting somebody. And that's how distribution would go on a daily basis. This survival of the fittest, shot at on their way there, shot at on their way home. And the other thing to remember is that all three sites of the four, one was up near the Netzarim, south of the Netzarim, not in Gaza City, but in Berish. And the other three sites were south of the Marag corridor. If you're a Palestinian and you walk down the secure corridor and you walk south of the Marag corridor where all three sites were, you can't go home. You can't cross back over the Marag corridor and go back into central Gaza and go home. You were then relegated and displaced to an displaced person camp, either Rafah camp or Mawasi camp, Nasser camp, or Rafah camp. You don't go home. That is the definition of displacement. That's a war crime. Forcing unarmed civilians, forcing the civilian population, forcing them to travel through areas of active combat is a war crime. The Geneva Convention and international humanitarian law obligates the safeguarding and protection of civilians. And that's not happening. So that was how a site operates under the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. Also, I'd like to mention, we give them no water. None. We bring them no water. The humanitarian aid that's brought to them is a box of dried food parcel goods: dried rice, dried beans, dried pasta, dried lentils, flour. All of these things require water to cook and prepare to eat them. And we provide them no water at all.
Which is highly problematic because you need water even for a lot of the food. Something you mentioned about the 25,000 boxes. I mean, for the audience, that's nothing. That's what it'll feed like 7 to 8,000 people, right? Explain to everybody, because based on your experience, like the 25,000 boxes, how many people would it feed on a daily basis? And then remember, there's probably about 1.5 to 1.7 million people left in Gaza after the hundreds of thousands that have likely been killed or injured. Do jump in.
Well, what I would like to say is, so yes, there are probably only about 1.5 to 1.6 million that are survived that actually are still alive in Gaza. I believe that. However, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation offers their what they say to demonstrate their performance is 2.1 million. That's what they say. So, do I believe that there's still 2.1 million still alive in Gaza? No, I do not believe that. However, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation states every day we fed 2.1 million people. We fed 2.1 million people. So that's the number that they use. So to be fair, to be unbiased, that's GHF's number. 2.1 million people in the enclave. Okay. So as of today, GHF in their advertisement today have said that they've delivered 120 million meals. 120 million meals to a population of 2.1 million, 3 meals a day, over 82 days. They've been operating for 82 days now. The contract performance period ends on the 21st of August. We're now on the 13th of August. They've been operating for 82 days. If you do that math, 120 million divided by 2.1 million divided by 3 divided by 82, there's 50, let's see, no, 60. There's about 65 days, 60 to 65 days of no food. That that number only feeds the population of Gaza for about 17 days. Even if you were to give the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation the benefit of the doubt to say, okay, maybe you were only designed to give them 1 meal a day. Okay, that's still only 1 meal every 1.5 days. And there still leaves a gap of 30 days with no food. That is not feeding a population. That is starving a population, and it is by design. Furthermore, and I've done the math on this, I would welcome anyone from the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation to sit down with me at the table and do the math. This is what they advertise, not me. This is their numbers. That one box feeds a family of 5, 3 meals a day for 3.5 days. That means that one box has 52.5 meals in it equivalent. Again, not meals, just raw ingredients, dried raw ingredients that require water to cook. So, not meals, the ingredients for meals. So, if you take all of the calories in that box, if you take everything out of that one box that's supposed to be 52.5 meals, and you calculate all the calories of the post cooking nutritional value, not pre cook, post cook, because you have to cook it. Each meal is about 210 calories, 200 to 210 calories. So at 3 meals a day, that's about 630 calories. 630 kilocalories a day in 3 meals for a human being. That's starvation. And that's if they're getting 3 meals a day. If they're only getting 1.5 meals per day, that means every 1.5 days they're getting 210 calories and no water. That is starvation. That isn't a hunger crisis. That is designed starvation. And that is what's happening. And the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation celebrates that. They celebrate that statistic. And it's deceitful. And the world needs to know what the truth is.
Yeah. Just coming on to the specifics of what happened during the aid. One of the things I heard you mention is obviously you spoke about the fact that that people were being fired at, whether it was at their feet, in the air, towards the Mediterranean Sea. You also mentioned in previous interviews that you'd never ever seen any Palestinian with any form of weapon. If you can expand on that and explain.
I was in Gaza every day from the 24th of May until I resigned on the 13th of June. Every day, every site. I wasn't just assigned, most of the contractors are assigned to one site, or they're assigned to a mobile team that drives back and forth to the sites, and they don't actually stay on the sites. I worked with the mobile teams, with the static teams on sites, and both of the operational centers in Karim Shalom and Nahal Oz near Gate 96. Out of any contractor on contract, I oversaw all of the sites, all of the escort delivery, and operations from both operational sites. No one else had that level of experience or that level of knowledge. And between the 24th through the day I left, I had gone onto the sites every day. Some days, multiple sites in one day. In that time, I, Anthony Aguilar, never saw an armed Palestinian. Not once. Not with a rifle, not with a gun. There were times that on the sites that the Palestinians would bring a kitchen knife or some kind of tool to cut. And I'll tell you why. These boxes that we dropped off in these piles, when they get loaded at the port of Ashdod and then brought to Karim Shalom, and I can share pictures of this because I witnessed it, I saw it. They're wrapped in this very thick industrial grade plastic wrap to keep all the boxes together in this stack of 42 boxes per pallet. There is no way to get through that without a knife. I know that because on one of the second day on one of the sites when I was there, after I saw the first day with the Palestinians wrestling to try to get through this plastic and get to the food, I was like, can you even tear that? Like, what is it? And I tried it myself. A you know a a physically fit former soldier. I couldn't tear that plastic. I had to use my knife. I had to use a knife to cut it to open it. So the Palestinians began bringing kitchen knives, not tactical knives, not machetes, not swords, kitchen knives, so they could cut through the plastic. On one occasion, I was standing next to a young Palestinian who was about older teenager, likely there getting food for his family. And he had a kitchen knife, and he showed it to me. And he pointed at it, and he pointed to the plastic. He cut the plastic. And then without asking, he then turned the blade around so the handle was pointing towards me, and he handed the knife, and he said, "Here." Because he wasn't a threat. They are simply trying to get food. There is not one time that I ever saw a Palestinian returning fire to the IDF, armed with any type of weapons, nor hostile intent in any way. One anecdote I'd like to share that again, something that sticks with me. On the 2nd of June, at site number 1, early morning distribution. Once the IDF told the UG Solutions contractors to get the Palestinians off the site, to get them out of there, the UG Solutions contractors started throwing stun grenades, as became the normal practice. And that stun grenade landed between me and two women that were sitting there picking up beans and pasta from the ground because there was no food left for them, and they were scrounging for what they could get. And this stun grenade detonated, and it put shrapnel into my forearm, tear gas into my face. The person that helped me up, that helped walk me out of that cloud of tear gas, who then helped wipe my eyes, was a Palestinian man. Not an American contractor, not an IDF soldier, a Palestinian man, not a threat. The only time that I was ever hurt or saw anybody hurt or killed was at the hands of UG Solutions contractors or at the hands of the IDF. And that's the truth. Never saw an armed or hostile Palestinian on or near the sites.
And just that leads me to the next question. And this brings me to there was a major stampede at one of the sites, which was site number 3, I believe, on July the 16th, which allegedly resulted in the death of 20 people. The GHF responded by blaming Hamas, despite evidence suggesting quite clearly it was the IDF. Based on what you're saying, that you never saw a scenario where any Palestinian was armed. What's your understanding of what happened that day?
Well, I was not there, but I do know that on July 16th, it did occur at secure distribution site number 3, which is in the southern portion of Khan Yunis, right up to the edge south of the Mirag corridor. Why that's important? I wasn't there on the 16th, but I was at Site 3 on the 28th of May. I was at Site 3 on the 3rd of June. I was at Site 3 on the 10th of June. I've got photos taken by me at the site that have been geolocated and time stamped. After the 28th of May on site number 3, myself and some of the other contractors recognized a problem. At that point, we had delivered on site 1, site 3, and on both occasions, we experienced overwhelming stampede and just chaos because there was no order, there was no control, there was no organization to the process. And the report that I provided on the 28th of May, an 11-page document, an 11-page report on the security issues, the safety issues, the rules of engagement issues, the issues of the use of non-lethal force, the what I called excessive force. And on the first page of this 11-page document was a summary of what was in there. And I clearly said in this document, which was provided to the leadership on the 28th of May, if we do not fix the problems and adjust how we do distribution, specifically on site number 3, because site number 3 was very congested, very narrow. There was an IDF tank company, Merkava Tanks, with their base right, like sharing almost the same location, not on our site, but right next to it. And it was a death site. It was a death trap. And I wrote in that report that if we don't make adjustments to these sites and establish a better process, people will die. People will be trampled to death. People will be shot at. There's no like process to the sites. We can't keep doing it this way. And I was ignored. Nope. We're going to keep doing it the way we're doing it. We're not going to change anything. Okay. And then on the 16th of July, 20 people were killed. 20 Palestinians killed. Not a single one of them armed. On site number 3 on the 16th of July. Was it Hamas? No. Was the stampede caused because UG Solutions personnel would fire tear gas and stun grenades and shoot at the crowd to get them to leave? And as they left, they were then being shot at by the IDF that caused the chaos and the confusion and the stampeding, where 20 people died, 19 trampled to death, and one allegedly, according to GHF, was stabbed, which I have not seen any evidence of that, but 20 people died, not near the site, not close to the site, on the site, on Site 3. 20 people, 20 Palestinians dead. That is not something that Hamas did. That was a issue that we could have prevented. That blood is on the hands of the UG Solutions, the Safe Reach Solutions, and the GHF leadership. That blood is on their hands.
I vehemently agree with you. Now I just want to bring you to one story, and it's kind of hit the airwaves quite a bit, and I do want you to give your kind of understanding of it, and then we will go into some of the attempts made to discredit you based on that. But just before we do, so you had an interaction with a young Palestinian boy named Amir, who I believe is 10 years old, at site number 2. What did he say? What happened that moved you? And how did you learn that he was killed shortly